So I'm Pam Helton with the Georgia Municipal Association. I want to welcome you to GMA's first Talk It Up Thursday session. The Member Services team will be having a session the last Thursday of each month on different topics of interest to local government. So we hope you will be able to join us for some other Talk It Up Thursday sessions as we go along. Today's first session will focus on probation services oversight, and you will hear from Barbara Neville, who is with the Georgia Department of Community Supervision, and our own Allison Earls, who is the Senior Associate General Counsel, will give us some comments at the end as well. So let's go through just a couple of slides that will give you some instructions about our Ring Central platform in case you're not familiar with it. So at your screen, you'll see at the bottom, middle, you'll be able to access participants by clicking on participants. And then you will also have the opportunity on the left corner over here to unmute yourself if you need to and to start your video. And there's a little right here that you can click on to do that. You can choose different views in this right-hand corner. At the top, it'll allow you to select different views. We want you to be able to ask questions today. So in the chat box, be sure to type your questions in, and we will address those at the end of the session. We don't want you to leave here without your questions being answered. And if we don't get to them, we will definitely try to get back with you if we don't know the answer. So before I'm going to go ahead and introduce our first speaker, who is Barbara Neville. And she is, Barbara has began her career in criminal justice with the Department of Corrections in 2006 as a probation officer in Cobb County. She was promoted to program manager within the Offender Administration in 2008, and she was then promoted to assistant director of Offender Administration in 2009, and then 6 months later, promoted to the director of Offender Administration. So Barbara served in the director capacity until she transferred to the State Board of Pardons and Paroles as the hearing examiner in 2012, where she also served as the DOC liaison and was responsible for all residential substance abuse treatment graduates throughout the state. In August of 2016, Barbara was appointed by the Commissioner of the Department of Community Supervision to the Director of Misdemeanor Probation Oversight, and she currently holds that position today. Barbara has lots of experience, as you can see, and she's got a lot of information to share with you today. And I'm going to ask her to unmute herself and to give us a great program about today.
All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. First, I want to thank you for allowing me to speak with you today and everybody that had a part of getting me invited to be here. I'm very honored to share some exciting information about misdemeanor probation oversight. Obviously, I'm a little partial, but I absolutely love our mission and our core values of what we are doing here in the state of Georgia. So I will go ahead and get started because I do want to allow some time for questions, of course. And can everybody hear me okay? You can hear me fine? Okay, just want to double check. So I went ahead and started my presentation with our mission. So we are up under the Department of Community Supervision, and of course, DCS is responsible for supervision of all probation and parole felons, right? So anybody with a felony. So we're tucked up underneath them. So we kind of developed our own mission statement alongside of the providers that we actually oversee. So our mission is to evaluate, educate, and regulate misdemeanor probation to ensure compliance with Georgia law, board rules, policies, as well as promote the industry's best probation supervision practices. So again, we didn't just develop this as MPOU as oversight, we developed this alongside of the providers. We came together and developed that. So just a quick overview of how small our team is. You have myself, and then you have my compliance monitor board liaison, Aura, and then we have our training coordinator who does all of our training statewide throughout Georgia, because there is a requirement for all of the providers and individuals to receive a certain amount of statutory training within misdemeanor. So with that being said, we're not post-certified, we're not certifying anybody, but we are providing important information that is helpful for the providers to do, become the best practice that they can. So we show them what we are looking for, and we'll get into that in later slides. But then the hard work and backbone are the compliance monitors. Those are the ones that are getting into the case notes and the financials of it every day. So a small but mighty group. I can't speak enough positive things about them. They are all amazing and wonderful. And hopefully if you haven't met them, we'd love to someday be in person and meet everybody. Okay, just a quick overview. We are authorized to register misdemeanor probation entities. We conduct our audits. We investigate potential violations. And then our board of community supervision is the one that promulgates our DCS board rules. So we just ensure that all the providers in Georgia are registered, that they have a service agreement, and that they are in compliance with all statutory laws and our board rules as far as probation supervision. So we are the sole entity responsible for enforcing DCS rules and regulations, and we have a statutory requirement, which is OCGA 42.8, 100 through 109. And I go ahead and put my famous quote that I always say to all my providers, that we're in this together. You know, we're working in concert with the providers towards a common goal. One of my biggest sells when I first took over DCS with MPOU, I wanted them to know we're not out to get them. We're not out to say, oh, we found something wrong, or we're here, we got you. We're here to say, hey, we found something wrong. This is how we can fix it. Let's fix it and let's move. So we're trying to create that culture between us so that it is more of a working relationship towards a common goal. So even though I said we're not certifying in post, we do offer some post credit hours. So we do have some governmental providers only that have post certified officers that work there. So we do offer post certification for some of our trainings. So with that being said, we always have to have our lesson plan and our enabling objectives, and they all in compliance with our post requirements so we can give those credits. So I went ahead and just did our enabling objectives, since I am a post certified training officer. And I wanted to give you a little rundown of what we're going to learn today. So I know I'm moving a little fast, but I have a lot of information, a lot of exciting information, and I want to make sure that I get through it so we still have some time for questions. So first, we're going to review the creation of DCS and give you a little history about how MPOU came about. We're going to explain the authority and responsibilities that are assigned to us, and then we're going to identify the activities that we do on a daily basis. So just a short rundown of the history. It really starts around 2000, where misdemeanor was removed from state probation. So I remember this. I won't tell you how long I've been around. It tells you a little bit. But I remember when felony did supervise misdemeanor probation, and then there was a statutory change in 2000 that was no longer part of their responsibilities. In 2014, there was an audit conducted by the Department of Audits and Accounts, which identified a lot of problems within misdemeanor probation, and the fact that there really wasn't an oversight or a entity that was responsible for ensuring that these providers were abiding by statute. So, of course, in 2014, there was a Georgia Supreme Court ruling, and then the Criminal Justice Reform Council went ahead and passed the law that created DCS and then the Misdemeanor Probation Oversight Unit in 2015. So that was actually called House Bill 310, and that created the 42.8.100 through 109, which created DCS and MPOU. And then in 2016, it was adjusted so that MPOU would then be the sole entity to oversee all of the providers and allow the DCS board to promulgate the rules. And it also created an advisory council. With that being said, I know I'm going kind of fast. I'm excited. I know there's a lot of information. Does anybody have any questions? I don't see anything in the chat, so I'll just keep on moving along. And if you hear anything or you have a question, please just stop me. I'm good with doing that as we go. So again, our mission, I've already told you that, but we did create a vision also. And our vision for misdemeanor probation oversight alongside with all of the providers in Georgia is to create the most effective and accountable misdemeanor probation in the nation. So we went big, right? But you always go big. I feel like you shoot for the moon, you land in the stars. So our authority and responsibility, again, with 1052.02 that's one of our rule numbers are the 105202, and then the coinciding statutory authority is 4233. So again, that just gives us the authority to register misdemeanor probation entities. So before any entity can come into Georgia and start supervising misdemeanor probation, they have to register through misdemeanor probation oversight. And then that gives us all of the access to approve their contracts and make sure that there's all the information is in the contract. It also gives us the authority to go in and review all of their paperwork if we need to. And then it makes sure that we have the ability for compliance and investigate potential violations. It appointed me as the MPOU director, and I speak on behalf of our commissioner. And then we do have the authority to impose sanctions. So I haven't had to do that yet because, and I'll kind of go through a little bit of our history. We kind of did a baseline in 2015 just to see where we were. And then, of course, we developed our training unit in 2016. So we are just now getting to the point where if providers have been consistently committing the same offenses, so to speak, then we will start imposing sanctions. And those sanctions can be $5,000 per offense. Or I can also revoke their registration, which will stop them from being able to provide probation supervision services. So again, we are oversight. A lot of people think that I have all the caseload information, that we're part of supervising. We're not, we're just the oversight. So we do get the case information from the provider if we request it, but we don't necessarily have access to all of that. So if somebody calls and asks me if Barbara Neville's on misdemeanor probation, I have no way of being able to pull that. I would have to look at what court they were sentenced in, find the contract, the service agreement that has that court, and then reach out to that provider to then get case information. So if I do have citizen complaints, that's kind of how I go about it. All right, a little information about our registration process. It applies to both governmental and private. So I know a lot of people say, well, you only look at private companies. No, we do have governmental companies. We have probation entities that have went in-house is what we call them. But we treat everybody the same. We don't make any differentials about if you're private or if you're governmental. Everybody goes by the same rules. Everybody goes by the same statutory requirements. So it applies to everybody. And again, I said earlier that they have to be approved prior to beginning any kind of services. Entities that we have to have, all of the owners and directors have to meet certain qualifications. they have to have initial approval before they can become the director. And then they have to identify at least one employee that's responsible for direct supervision. So that is what we call a 5-year PO. Now, a lot of people wonder, can the director be the 5-year PO? Yes, the director can be, but you can also have a director and then another 5-year PO. But you have to have a director and a 5-year PO, but they can be the same person. So a 5-year PO is just somebody that has 5 years experience in some type of probation, parole, or correction. So I've had to look at resumes in the past to determine if they have some kind of supervisory experience, and that's usually what I'm looking for. Okay, and all of our individuals that register in our entities have to maintain a clear criminal record. We have to ensure that each individual completes their continuing education, as I spoke of before. And then they have to adhere to all of our requirements established in our DCS board rules. So one of our major things that we have is our quarterly reports. And the providers do have to submit numbers. And as of right now, just so you guys are aware, that we have 75 providers in the state of Georgia. 51 of those are considered governmental and 24 are considered private. So our little small group of misdemeanor probation oversight is responsible for auditing all of those 75 providers every year, because that is our mission. You know, we're not going to let many years go by. We're going to look at everybody every single year. And I believe there's almost 750 contracts or service agreements. So one private provider can have a number of service agreements throughout the state. So our quarterly reports that we require the probation entities to complete, they're supposed to provide that to MPOU, and they're also supposed to provide a copy of that to their chief judge within 15 days after the close of each quarter. I will say that during the pandemic, I know with COVID, there's been a lot of things, and we've been giving the providers a little bit of leeway because we have had offices that have closed for weeks at a time because of a pandemic and things like that. So again, we work with the providers, and we have extended that time frame, but every quarter we will still have to have that information no matter when it comes. I'm not sure if the statutory requirement changed as far as providing the annual report to the governing authority. I know that if you ask for it, they will give it to you. I think a lot of the providers are unsure if anybody wants their quarterly report. But I will say, if you ever need a quarterly report, you can always reach out to me. And at the end of this presentation, I have my contact information, and I'd be happy to share it with anybody. That's kind of why I'm happy to be here and bridge this relationship, because there's a lot of communication that I feel that we could be providing you guys and that you guys could be providing us, so that we can all be working together in concert. So,
Barbara, this is Allison Earls. And first, sorry to interrupt, I just want to say how fantastic it has been to work with you on probation matters. I've learned so much from you. But one thing that I would just like to mention is that the arrangement, the contract is between the city and the probation company. And so one of the things, whenever you're on one end of a contract, there's oversight that's expected of the city. Of course, the lion's share of the oversight is done by MPOU, but this annual report that is supposed to be provided to the council, I would say that's something that, if they're not providing it to you, should be something to tickle, so that every year the governing authority can look at the annual report, because it shows important information. Thanks.
Thank you, Allison. And I'm glad you said that. That was on the tip of my tongue to mention that the law just changed, and correct me, I'm not sure of exactly the year. I think it was 2019, where the service agreement used to be signed by the chief judge and agreed upon by the governing authority, whereas now it's changed to where, sorry, stop. It's changed to now the governing authority signs the service agreement and the chief judge agrees to it. So it kind of swapped that responsibility, which in turn has triggered us to say, hey, we'd like to give you guys information, not only about the service agreements, but we'd love to send you a final audit report if you would like to have that annually, just to see where your providers are and what we're finding and what we're not finding, or, you know, it could be good news too. So any other questions on that? Allison, did I cover that good? Sorry about my dogs, guys. Okay, so individuals have a registration requirement too. So we have two phases. We have the provider, the entity is, so we call it, that's the entity as a whole, whether they're private or governmental. But then within each entity you have individuals. So they also have to be registered. So we go through criminal background checks for all of the employees. They have to maintain a clear criminal background. They get fingerprints. There's age requirements. These are all statutory requirements that they have. And again, the contracts that we have that I had mentioned as of January, there's 800, or excuse me, as far as the employees that we have currently in the state of Georgia, under all of the 75 providers, there are 812 employees working within the misdemeanor probation. And those could be directors, 5-year POs, probation officers, contractors, etc. But everybody passes through our registration process if they touch anything that has to do with misdemeanor probation. Okay, so again, registration is required for all probation officers, all administrative staff, any agents, interns, volunteers, or contractors. So the GBI actually audits me to ensure that we are making sure that the providers are making the criminal history information confidential, and that they're shredding the paperwork and they're getting it from where they should be. So if they hire a shredding contractor, that has to be registered through me too, so that I can ensure that they are making sure that they're getting rid of that information. So any reported changes have to go through us too. So if you have an entity, this has happened in the past where we had a private probation entity and somebody makes a decision that, hey, we want to go in-house and we want to run our own probation entity. That all has to be changed, reported through me. We need to know the address, primary location, the contact information, and then of course any service agreements or contracts, along with staff additions, departures, promotions. And then if some of our staff change their name, some people get married, some people change their names for any reasons, they have to let us know for that. So we're keeping track of pretty much everything that's going on within the misdemeanor probation world in Georgia. Can we go next slide, Pam? Okay, so here's the good stuff. Here's the fun stuff. So we have the compliance, and again, I put all the rules here so that you can refer it. I know I do have a website link at the end of this presentation, and Pam, you have my permission to share this with all of the participants and anybody that's interested to get my contact information and our website. So I built my own website, and I pretty much put everything and anything that needs to be referenced on that website. And that just helps us to communicate back and forth. And it has a copy of our most updated board rules. So if you're interested and you have some leisure time that you want to really entertain yourself with some wonderful reading material, you can always go to the website and read our DCS board rules. We worked really hard on those. So with our service agreements, of course, it's an agreement, like we said, with the local governing authority. and then the chief judge agrees to that agreement. It is a service agreement for every court that's served, and it has to be signed and filed with me. So we make sure it has all the information in it that we need, because that helps us with our audit process. And then, of course, we make sure that the judge is notified every time we complete an audit. And again, I said this earlier, this is where we would love, if you're interested in that final audit, we would love to send that to the governing authority also, so that it doesn't just end up with the chief judge, which is fine if that's the case and that's what you want. But if you're interested in that final audit, you can have a copy of that also. So I think this is the next couple slides is just talking about the agreements and what they minimally have to contain. It has to have a description of the services, the scope of work, what the individual qualifications are that are if it's any more specific than what we have is minimally required. And then, of course, criminal hit record checks completed. We do that on all individuals. We like to make sure that there's policies and procedures for individual training. We do provide training from Misdemeanor Probation Oversight Unit. We're not required to do that, but we figured we would like to, go a little step above and at least provide the information that we think is helpful for them to be successful in their audits. So if they have any other policies or procedures, I know there's internal program systems and things like that that they might want to have trained. We do like the service agreements to have a staff level, some kind of supervision standards that includes the type of frequency and contacts. That way, when we are auditing that provider, we're ensuring that they're complying with what you guys are expecting them to do. Of course, we do like to know what the collection procedures are, what the fines are, the fees are, how they're going to distribute restitution. Of course, there's a law that is required for that you all, I'm sure, are very aware of. And then procedures for handling indigent probationers, pay-only cases, and consecutive cases. So as you can see, when we get a copy of that agreement, that's kind of like our baseline of saying, okay, this is what the governing authority is expecting of that provider. And as we're auditing them, we're going to ensure that they're in compliance with that, on top of what we're expecting of them and what the statutory requirements are.
Barbara, one of the things that we worked on together that was so helpful was GMA prepared a sample probation company contract. And so we kind of looked at some of the, lawsuits and areas that caused a lot of issues, a lot of heartache, and prepared a probation company contract that put some obligations on the probation company. And we have that available on our website for use, and that was reviewed by Barbara's organization as meeting the requirements. So we've got one that's already drafted if you need a starting point.
Absolutely. And Allison, that was great working with you. It's helped me so very much over the past couple of years. And I also have that on my website too. So we have that link there too. So thank you. And I knew you were going to bring that up also at the end, right? Are you going to show them an example of that maybe?
Briefly, if we have time, yes.
Sure. Okay. All right. So again, we need to know with the agreements, revocation procedures, reporting, record keeping procedures. Again, this is all mostly statutory. We did make sure that there was a termination or an expiration date on the service agreements that do not exceed 5 years. When I first took over MPOU, I was reviewing some service agreements that were signed 20 years ago by a judge that was no longer on the bench. So we thought it was a good idea to just at least have the service agreements reviewed every 5 years. And again, if there's no changes, we're perfectly fine with an addendum and a new signature and a new date if there's no changes to that. But as of January, we have 789 contracts in the state. So 146 of those contracts are governmental and 643 are private. So if you go back to my future data where I told you that we have 75 providers and 51 are governmental and 24 are private, that just reiterates what I said about you can have multiple contracts within one provider. So 24 private providers are holding 643 contracts in the state. And 51 governmentals are holding 146 contracts in the state. So it just goes to show how many courts we have and all the work that goes into it. So we try to keep all of this straight as best as we can. And I think we got our thumb on the pulse, so we're doing really well. So again, our case file reviews, just so you guys are aware, we look at all of the case files. So we will request a certain percentage of cases depending on the number of cases that are reported in their quarterly report. So as you guys see this presentation, you'll see kind of like the circle of all the information. We get the quarterly report. That tells us how many probationers that they have on their caseload. We have their service agreement now. We look at what the expectation is of the governing authority and the chief judge. We're comparing all of that with the case notes, and we're going to make sure that there's appropriate case supervision. We do a case file review. We reach out to the provider. We tell them a random number of names, but we do separate it as far as if they're active probation. We do closed cases. We do told warrant cases. We do pay-only cases. So we're looking at a number of different types of cases, and we make sure that we get a good enough sample size to do two things: to make sure that we can catch if there is a reoccurring error that's going on, and two, we don't want to get too much information, because we don't want to bog down the providers, because their number one job is supervising the probationers, right? So we try to be very cognizant of going in there, getting the information that we need, kind of staying out of their way, being able to find the information, and then getting back with them to show them how to correct that. So again, we're just ensuring case management, that they're abiding by laws, our DCS rules, and the service agreements. So the process is pretty much what I said. We just switched it up this year. So historically, we were asking for 6% of the cases, but we didn't want to exceed 150 cases, because again, we have some providers that have thousands and thousands of cases. But we did a little assessment, and I did some research. I'm a longtime college student. I think I'll probably be in college till the day I die at some point. But I did a little statistical research, and with our experience in the past 4.5 years, we can tell that we can get 4% now, or 50 cases, and not to exceed 120 cases. So within that, again, we're not totally bogging them down, but we are still getting a high enough percentage of that number of their caseload to be able to spot some kind of a trend. And we'll get into what those are in a minute. So the minimal requirements to provide on each case, we ask for a sentence sheet of all cases, of all names. So if I ask you for 150 or 120 names, the provider, I'm gonna ask them for the sentence sheet, the case note, all the court orders, all the warrants, petitions, tolling orders, all of their financial records, and all of their correspondence material related to that case. So it's a lot of information that they have to give us. And then what we do is we do an administrative phase. So we do kind of like a first draft. So again, I want to reiterate, we're not out to get anybody. We're just saying, okay, this is the stuff that we found. So we're going to tell them, hey, here's the findings that we have. We're going to identify those issues and the failures within the laws, the contracts, or the rules. And then we're going to propose remedies and resolutions for each of these findings. So what we like to do is discuss that with the provider. That not only gives the provider, the director, an opportunity to fix something. So I say that, for example, say I go in and I say, hey, you don't have a tolling affidavit on this case, and that's a finding. Well, what if he says, oh, well, when I scanned it to you, I was missing that tolling affidavit. Well, once they provide us with that information, I will take that off. That's no longer a finding because it's been resolved. So again, we're going to make recommendations on those findings, we're going to identify actions or omissions which could be problematic. So again, we go into a high liability type of scenario for these providers. And I tell them, you know, this is for your benefit, right? I'm telling you this could be a possible high liability problem for the provider, which in turn will be a high probability for the governing authority and the chief judge. So we're really looking out for everybody. So the final draft, again, we've done the administrative, we've talked to the director, we've talked about the findings that we have. We also allowed the director an opportunity to write a written response. So when I send that final audit out to the chief judge and whoever that would like it as far as the governing authorities, you will get our final audit, which has all of the findings, our recommendations on how to fix it, but you'll also get a director's response. And most of the time, they will say, hey, yeah, the MPOU pointed out this problem. I've done an internal audit. I've fixed all of this, and it's no, you know, moving forward, we're going to train our staff to resolve the issue, et cetera, et cetera. So that could be helpful for you, so you're not panicking, right? You're not getting the final audit going, oh my gosh, all this is wrong. Please know that we've already started working with them. We've already shown them how to fix it, and 99.9% of the time, as soon as you tell an entity that something's wrong and how to fix it, they're right on top of getting that fixed. So we provide that to the chief judge, and we would love to provide that to the governing authority if you guys are interested in that information. We do, again, focus on high liability findings, and then we do make them do an internal audit. So an internal audit is me saying, hey, I found 25 cases of a tolling issue. I'm not just going to have that provider fix those 25 cases, because if I've seen a trend in an issue, then there's probably more of a problem outside of those 25. So I make the provider actually go back to all of their cases that fall under that finding and go through all of those. And then we do a follow-up on that. So to make sure that all of those cases are fixed. So you can rest assured that if we found something, we're not only just making them fix the ones we found, we're making them fix everything that is close to that. So performance results can impact the frequency or future of compliance reviews. I tell the providers all the time, we'll be out there once a year for sure. We have waived some providers most recently because we do have a few providers that we've gone out there for 3 years in a row and we just are not finding anything. There's no findings. They're really good. So we're giving them an incentive to say, hey, we're not going to do a formal audit on you this year. And that's just a really nice way of saying good work, right? Pat on the back. But I always tell them, if I get a citizen complaint or if I get some kind of correspondence that makes me think, okay, I probably need to reach out, that could very well initiate an audit for that year. And that also says, even if you've had your annual audit and I get some kind of concern or issue or anything that would make me think I need to look into this, you could have 2 audits in a year. So it all just depends on what we're finding and what we're getting feedback on. So when I talked about high liabilities, now this is not all inclusive. Of course, this is not what we're looking at, but these are what I've identified as areas that could possibly cause the most turmoil as far as, having issues within supervision. So what we've been finding, and of course, I do have to say, when we first started, we had like 246 high liability findings throughout the state. And last year we had 6. So speaks huge volumes to my training director, to my compliance monitors, to the fact that they are getting out there, they're talking to the providers. The providers are very receptive. They're doing an amazing job. So we went from having a lot of high liability findings to 6 high liability findings last year, which I just can't say that enough. I think it's amazing. So, but what we were finding, and probably still will always find, of course, are tolling, high liabilities, indigent offender, high liabilities, consecutive cases, supervising past case expiration, and money collection. And most of these are human error issues, especially supervising past case expiration. It's because maybe they had a consecutive case. They thought it was consecutive, but it actually was concurrent. And so they were supervising them past that. Of course, we do make them refund money if they've done that and they've collected money after that, which falls into our money collection. The consecutive cases, again, all cases are considered concurrent unless it specifically says it on the sentence sheet that it's to be considered consecutive. So we're looking for that. Indigent offenders, this is one I get a lot of citizen complaints about because the judge is the only one that can really consider somebody indigent. But if you have a provider that has somebody saying, I don't have a job, I don't have any way of paying you, I don't have any money, and then they're throwing them in jail for that, that could be a little bit of a sticky situation. So we really suggest that, hey, if this person truly can't pay, and that's the only reason why they're having problems abiding by their probation supervision requirements, then you should really just bring them back in front of the judge and let the judge decide that. And then our number one, of course, is tolling. So there's a lot of turmoil about tolling. There's an entire statute. Again, if you want to read up on it, we've made some adjustments to that statute a couple years ago to kind of make some clarification, but it is a lot different for misdemeanor than it is felony. So felony, you can just go and toll. Misdemeanor, they have to call the jail. They have to call 2 times. They have to put that all on the affidavit. They have to check the local jail rosters. They have to send a 10-day letter, and they have to wait the 10 days. So we've had some issues with the 10-day letter. Somebody will say report within, in the next 5 days. Well, we have a problem with that because then the probationer thinks, well, I only have 5 days, whereas actually they have 10. So we're working through a lot of those little issues. But again, if you've told somebody, not you, but if the provider's told somebody and it's been inappropriate, that is considered a pretty big high liability, because then you have, a whole other issue legally. So.
And Barbara, I'd like to just note that if your city, if you have leadership that's focused on criminal justice reform, that cares about its city brand, these kind of situations, it seems a little bit dry here, but it's a really big deal, and they turn into news stories that talk about very difficult situations, and it can really damage the brand of the city if its citizens are kept on probation longer than they should. I mean, probation is a very restrictive thing. In many situations, if you're on probation, you can't go to bars, you can't leave town without talking to your probationer. It's a very restrictive situation to be on probation, and especially these issues of people who are not able to pay their fines. It can be really damaging. And so being able to review this audit and see if your probation company is doing things that cause exposure to your city is very important.
Thank you. All right, so high liability trends, I think I just mentioned this. So when we started, again, when we went back to the beginning of DCS was created in 2015, MPOU was given our authority in 2016. So I always say we didn't start till 2016. So what I did is just a baseline audit. We didn't try to sanction anybody. We just said, hey, let's go out there and find out what the problems are. In 2017, there were 256 high liability findings, and that's when I implemented the MPOU training. So I hired a director. We started hitting the road and teaching everybody everything we could possibly teach them about how to get into compliance. So as you can tell, that almost took 50% of our high liabilities away by the next year. And then as we rolled on with the training, it dramatically decreased to 24 in 2019, and now we're down to 6. So we're continually doing that training and that reiteration. We do try to change our training up a little bit every year. Like this year, we're including the GBI, human trafficking, the Commission on Family Violence, because it is important, because a lot of misdemeanor are that first line defense, right? They're the first offenses that they're getting before they're getting the felonies. So, but we do continually reiterate the case status, the tolling, the fee collection, the pay only, like Ms. Earls had mentioned. Those are those high liability findings that could hold that liability. And I tell the providers all the time, if you're on the news, I'm on the news. So nobody wants to be on the news. So let's keep working together, and I'd love to see this high liability trend go to 0. I think you went backwards, Miss Pam. So we should be on training. So our training requirements, again, I talked about 2017. I developed the training coordinator position, and we do a whole catalog of presentations that range from high liability functions, professionalism, customer service, general practices such as case note writings, anything that has to do with fundamental operations. We developed a 56-page what we look for documentation that is also on my website, that was just completed last year, that literally will take you step by step. If you want to have a probation department and you want to be running smoothly, it will tell you every single possible thing that you could need to do within your entity to make sure that you're in compliance. Again, we do a couple specialty courses, like Management 101. We figure, we're leadership positions, probation officers, law enforcement. So we want to make sure that we're providing leadership too, so we're not missing the point of there is still a personal aspect to probation, right? It's not just what's your name, did you get arrested? We're wanting to show them that there is something a little bit further than that. We do essential skills for trainers. So we were trying to do a program of train the trainer. Again, that was before last year. So since the pandemic, we've kind of stopped the train the trainer, since we're just barely trying to train our own at this point, right? So, but we will get back into that when we can get back into person, and hopefully, I know a couple providers have taken us up on the train the trainer, and they're actually providing their own training. So they get our training from us, our approved training from us, and then they provide that training. So it takes away from my training director and myself. So again, I want to reiterate, a lot of people get it confused saying that I'm going to certify somebody. I'm not a certifier. I can give you post credits, but I can't certify you as a peace officer or a probation officer. I'm just giving you the training that is required through our DCS board rules and statute. Okay, so just a little bit of data, and let me just check my time. Okay, I'm doing pretty good. We had 151 virtual sessions last year. So since the pandemic hit, and thank goodness we were very, very prepared, because we did our first part of our audits virtually anyway. So it was part of us staying away from the providers and keeping out of their hair, because they have a mission that they need to do, which you guys expect them to do, is supervising probationers. So we were doing a lot of that behind the scenes anyway. So when the pandemic hit, we just went ahead and went all online with our training, because they're still required to do it. So we started doing it. So we did 151 virtual sessions. We had 442 individuals and a total attendance of 3,758. So that's a big increase from 2019. We were doing it more in person. We had 48 events. And again, we are going to continue to do virtual sessions. It works, and why go backwards? But of course, as the pandemic releases, we would be very happy to come out and host an event. They're usually 2-day events, and it gives you, your regular annual hours, most of them anyway. So we're gonna, but again, we're not gonna stop doing the virtual sessions, but we will incorporate in-person sessions when the pandemic's over. And then, of course, just a little update on what they're required. So every probation officer is required to do 40 hours of orientation, and then that's within 6 months of your hire. And then after that, every year you're required to do 16 hours. So you can do supplemental 24 hours that we provide for the orientation. We provide for 24 hours. And the reason why we don't do 40 hours of orientation is because there's a lot of local things that we want them to provide, such as, say, the training on their computer system that they use. There's no way I would be able to train everybody on all of the different software that's out there. So we provide them with 24 hours of the orientation hours, and then of course we provide all of the 16-hour annual the 20 hours of annual in-service. So let me back up. So probation officers are required 40 hours of orientation. Administrative and other employees are required 16 hours, and that's all within 6 months. And then the annual in-service for probation officers is 20 hours, and everybody else has to get 8. So of course they can get more, but those are our minimum requirements. All right, so we're good on time. I think we still have some time for some questions, if that's okay. These are our enabling objectives. I hope you guys got everything. I know I went fast. Please visit our website. I think, Pam, the next slide has my contact information and our website link. And feel free to share that again with anybody that's interested.
Thank you, Barbara. Allison, do you have any closing comments you want to make before we see if we got any questions? You're muted. Let's see. Allison.
Yeah, I just, again, thank you very much, Barbara, for this presentation. I think it's just I just want to hit home how important it is that it is the city that is hiring this probation company. And if they're, knowing that what the probation company is doing is really important. The annual report should show you how much money the probation company is making off of your citizens. A lot of cities kind of think, we don't have to worry about this. The probation, it just kind of pays for itself and we don't have to think about it. But it's really important what the probation companies are doing. There's, if you were to look at states and our use of private probation, we have so many more citizens under probation than any other state in the country. The civil rights lawyers focus a lot on probation, and so it is really important to make sure that you're monitoring this probation company and to obviously get the resources from Barbara's organization. So you can say, yes, we have private probation, but we are scrutinizing it. We look at it every year. We take complaints seriously. We make sure that they're not requiring drug testing when the judge hasn't ordered drug testing. They know how much money is being made off of these individuals. I do encourage people to check out the sample contract, and Pam can send that to you afterwards. But this whole area of, it's important for the city to know what's happening with the court and with probation. You can't just say we're hands off. So thanks.
And I think from a monetary standpoint, cities need to ask for that report so they can give it to their auditor, as far as their documentation for the probation funds. So it's just, they need to do that as well. So it's important that the city has the input in that contract, and we've prepared something for you to get started to make sure, if you want to review your existing contract, just to make sure that it's up to date. Please do so, and we'll send that to you. Is there any comments or questions for Barbara or Allison? Well, Barbara, thank you again for joining us for our first Talk It Up Thursday session. I think you provided some great information, and I hope that you'll get some phone calls or some questions if they have questions about any of the services that you provide.
Absolutely. I hope anybody feel free to reach out to me directly, and it was my pleasure. I had a great time. Thank you.
Thank you. If you'd like to share this presentation with others, we will have recorded it, and we will probably have it available at least in a week. Just give us a week, and then you can share it with others in your organization. Okay, and if anybody does not have anything else, we will stand adjourned. It's right on time. Thanks for joining us.